I know if you are like me, sometimes people's stories don't add up. You listen with the utmost care and you try and remember the chain of events, but something seems missing, wrong, or absent. Today's story is a fill-in-the-gap story. It is in order for Jesus to be who he claimed to be, certain facts needed to happen because they had been predicted by the prophets before him. And the facts don't really make sense. There's no prophet to come out of Nazareth, and yet he's going to be called a Nazarene. Out of Egypt have I called my son. Well, which son? The nation of Israel? Well, no, prophecy is in past tense. You see, the Jews were rather befuddled about the whole thing. Dreams, warnings, some prophetic, some not. The other day, I dreamt that all of Vista del Valle down 14th Street was on fire. Hardly prophetic. But how do we sort through these crazy details and crazy dreams and discern what's really happening? Let's go back about 700 years, back to the days of the prophet Isaiah. He begins his talk about a suffering servant. God revealed to him, as we have heard during the lessons of Advent lessons and carols, that God would dwell with humans and take our likeness, be fully human, and experience some certain time-sensitive features. And so here they are. Number one, the Messiah's appearance was locked into a fixed period of time. Two, that fixed time would be while the second temple was still standing. And three, the Messiah had to come from a genetic line that was only verifiable through temple records. And the fourth startling fact is that the Messiah had to die a violent death. Daniel, the prophet, lived during the time of the exile in Babylon and received a vision that the Messiah would come after the temple was constructed and when Ezra and Nehemiah had finished their ministry. For those of you who have not read those books recently, Ezra was a priest, Nehemiah was the governor, and they were called to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem after the Babylonians had sacked the city 70 years prior. Daniel also predicted that after the appearance of the Messiah, the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. We know this happened when Titus' Roman legions marched on Jerusalem in 70 AD. The temple was no longer needed at that point. He destroyed both city and temple. Interestingly, the prevailing Jewish teaching was that the Messiah would be greeted with words from Psalm 118. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Sound familiar? We say that as part of the Et Benedictus, part of the Sanctus in every Eucharistic prayer. According to Daniel, the temple would not only be standing at the Messiah's appearance, but it would then soon be destroyed. That temple, the second temple, originally built by Ezra and embellished by Herod, was where Jesus did an incredible amount of his ministry, his teaching, and made some pretty incredible claims for himself. The Gospel of Mark, the one that scholars believe was the earliest one to hit paper, does not make any mention about the destruction of the temple, perhaps because it had not yet happened when it was written. But both Matthew and Luke record, "The day shall come in which not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down," probably because they wrote it after the destruction of the temple. Now, was there recalling Jesus saying this, Jesus pointing to Daniel's prophecy coming to pass? Less than 40 years would transpire before the destruction of the temple. And it's so thorough that to this day there's just a portion of the western wall that remains. And we really don't know where the Holy of Holies was. The coming of the Messiah had yet another time constraint. It was connected to his descent from the tribe of Judah. According to the book of Ezra, Judah's territorial position was maintained throughout the 70 years captivity in Babylon. Not only was the Messiah to be from the lineage of Judah, but more specifically from the house of David. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn to my servant David, your seed I will establish forever and build up your throne to all generations. The Messianic prophecy clearly refers to a descendant of David. But proof of such lineage was destroyed when the temple was sacked. And while we don't have the temple records, we do have the record of Jesus' family tree and the accounts that is given to us by both Luke and Matthew. They identify he is from the house of David. We don't know anyone else who lived at that time who claimed to be the Messiah who is descended from the tribe of Judah and the house of David, apart from Jesus. And even the Lucan account says that while Quirinius was governor of Syria, a census was taken. We know exactly because of when those people were in office that it mentions. That census was taken in the year 4 BCE. And now the suffering part. The idea that the Messiah would die was not new. Isaiah wrote of one who would suffer and die for the sins of the people, writing, "He was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken." And so Psalm 22 graphically portrays, many years before crucifixion would have been employed, a method of execution engineered by the Persians, adopted by the Romans, and at that point, as I said, not known by anyone. Now today's gospel fills in the clues. Jesus says who he is and is who he says. For us, the challenge is to understand that the same Jesus predicted, delivered, and given for folks like you and me is the same Jesus who can transform the fallen world in which we live. Years ago, I heard a summation of the gospel message. It is one beggar telling another beggar where there is bread. Here at St. Paul's, you have that living bread. You have that living bread that is broken and given for you. If Jesus can fulfill all the details, we can live into them. We can be bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, and the balm of Gilead to the hurting. It's our call. Let's live into it.